Aquí está a parte 1. Primeiras 3,000 palabras. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that no one talks about openly. It is not the exhaustion of working too hard or sleeping too little. It is the exhaustion of trying too hard to be loved, of waking up every morning and walking into your relationship already in a posture of need, already reaching, already hoping, already quietly bracing for the possibility that what you offer will not be quite enough. It is the exhaustion of a person who has confused the pursuit of love with the deserving of it, who has spent so long trying to earn what should have been freely given that they have forgotten what it feels like to simply be, without performing, without monitoring, without the constant low-grade anxiety of someone who believes, somewhere beneath everything they would consciously admit, that they are one wrong move away from being left. If you recognized yourself in any part of that description, I want you to stay with me. Because what I am about to share with you today is not a collection of tips for becoming more attractive or more appealing or more strategically positioned in your relationship. It is something far more important than that. It is an honest examination of why the pursuit of love, the begging for it, the chasing of it, the exhausting daily performance of trying to deserve it, is the very thing that makes love so much harder to find and to keep. And more importantly, it is a clear, psychologically grounded path towards something different, something that begins not with changing how you show up for your partner, but with changing how you show up for yourself. This is one of the most important conversations this channel has ever had. And if you are new here, I want you to know that this is what we do. We go beneath the surface of relationship advice and into the real, uncomfortable, transformative territory of why people love the way they love and what it actually takes to love differently. Subscribe now and turn on notifications because this series goes somewhere most relationship content never reaches. Now, let me tell you about a woman named Diana. Diana was 39 years old, had been married for 8 years, and was by any external measure a devoted and loving wife. She remembered anniversaries and birthdays and the small preferences her husband had mentioned only once in passing years ago. She anticipated his moods and adjusted herself accordingly. She softened her opinions in conversations where she sensed he might disagree. She apologized quickly, sometimes before she had even fully processed whether she had done anything wrong, because the discomfort of his disappointment felt more unbearable than the discomfort of taking responsibility for something that wasn't entirely hers to own. She was, in the language of people who would describe her, kindly, incredibly giving. In the language of what was actually happening, she was disappearing. And her husband, Thomas, was not a cruel man. He was not exploiting her. He was not consciously taking advantage of her willingness to accommodate, to apologize, to shrink. He was simply, and this is the part that makes this pattern so heartbreaking, responding to her the way that most people respond to someone who has made themselves very easy to take for granted. Not with cruelty, with absence. With a kind of comfortable inattention that is the natural human response to a presence that asks for nothing and therefore receives nothing in return. Diana came to understand this not through a dramatic confrontation or a moment of crisis, but through a single conversation with a friend who said something so simple and so precise that it lodged in her chest and stayed there for weeks. Her friend said, "You spend so much energy trying to make Thomas love you more. Have you ever considered that the problem might not be how much he loves you, but how much you love yourself? Diana's first response was the response that almost everyone has to that kind of observation when they first encounter it. A flash of defensiveness followed by a dismissal. She loved herself fine, she thought. She was not someone with low self-esteem. She had a career she was proud of. She had friendships that mattered. She was not the kind of person who didn't value herself. But her friend's words kept returning. In the quiet moments before sleep, in the middle of ordinary afternoons when she caught herself monitoring Thomas's expression across the dinner table, trying to read it, trying to calibrate her own behavior to whatever she found there. In the moments after she had apologized for something she wasn't sure she had done, and felt, in the aftermath of the apology, not relief but a familiar flatness, the flatness of someone who has just given something away that they needed to keep. And slowly, over those weeks of the words returning, Diana began to understand something that changed the entire shape of how she saw her marriage and herself within it. She began to understand that the issue was not how much Thomas loved her. The issue was that she had built her entire experience of being loved on a foundation of trying to earn it, and that a love built on earning is always, at some level, a love built on fear. The fear that if you stop earning, the love will stop coming. The fear that your intrinsic worth, the worth you carry simply by existing before you have done anything to deserve anything, is not quite sufficient. That you are, without the performance, slightly less than what is required. This is the root. This is the thing beneath the begging and the chasing and the exhausting pursuit of love that so many people live with for so long without naming it. It is not a character flaw. It is not a sign of weakness or instability or an inability to function in a relationship. It is a wound. A specific, identifiable wound that was almost certainly inflicted long before this relationship began. In the earliest experiences of being in relationship with other people, in the messages received in childhood about whether love was something you were or something you did. And here is what almost no one teaches about that wound. It cannot be healed from the outside. It cannot be healed by your partner loving you more or better or more consistently. It cannot be healed by the relationship improving, by the distance closing, by the conversations getting easier. Because the wound is not located in the relationship. It is located in you, in the part of you that decided, somewhere early and somewhere deep, that you were not quite enough as you were. And that part of you will find a way to doubt the love no matter how much love is offered, because it is not a shortage of love that created the wound. It is a shortage of the belief that you deserve it. Maybe this is landing somewhere real for you right now. Maybe you are watching this and recognizing the pattern, not just in your marriage, but in the entire history of your significant relationships. The way you have always worked a little harder than felt natural, given a little more than felt balanced, apologized a little faster than the situation required, monitored a little more carefully than was comfortable. Not because you are weak or broken or incapable of healthy love, but because somewhere along the way you learned that love was conditional, that it came in response to the right behavior, the right presentation, the right degree of making yourself easy to love, and you have been performing that right degree ever since with a competence so practiced that it has become invisible even to you. But there is a layer beneath this that almost no one identifies, because the pattern of earning love is not just about low self-worth. It is also, and sometimes more powerfully, about control. When you believe that love is something you earn through behavior, you also believe, at that same unconscious level, that you have some degree of control over whether you receive it. If you do the right things, you will be loved. If you are good enough, attentive enough, accommodating enough, the love will stay. And that belief, however exhausting its demands, offers something that feels like safety. It offers the illusion that love is not arbitrary, that it is not something that can be withdrawn without warning, without reason, without any recourse on your part. It offers the illusion that you are not helpless in the face of the most important emotional experience of your life, and giving up that illusion, stepping out of the exhausting performance of earning and into the genuinely terrifying openness of simply being, requires something that most people were never taught how to develop. It requires the capacity to tolerate uncertainty in love. To be in a relationship without knowing with certainty that it is secure. To offer yourself, your real self, not the performed version, without knowing in advance how it will be received. To trust not because you have earned the trust through perfect behavior, but because trust is, at its core, always a leap made without a guarantee. This is the transformation that this video is about. Not a new set of behaviors to perform, not a strategy for making yourself more attractive or more appealing, but the genuine, deep, profoundly liberating shift from a person who is trying to earn love to a person who has decided, not arrogantly, not defensively, but quietly and with full knowledge of the risk involved, that they are already worth loving, that the love they bring to a relationship is not contingent on perfect behavior or perfect accommodation or perfect anything, that they are, as they are, sufficient. That shift does not happen overnight. It does not happen through a single realization or a single video or a single conversation. It happens through practice, through the specific, daily, sometimes uncomfortable practice of choosing yourself in the small moments where you have always chosen to disappear. And it changes everything, not just how your partner responds to you, though it changes that too, in ways that are often surprising and significant, but how you experience yourself inside the relationship, how much of your own energy you have available for genuine connection, rather than for the exhausting surveillance of whether you are being loved enough, how present you can be in the actual moments of your life, rather than perpetually monitoring the emotional temperature of someone else's feelings about you. If you are recognizing yourself in Diana's story, if the pattern of earning love feels familiar in a way that goes beyond this relationship, in a way that feels like it has been with you for a very long time, I want you to know that the ebook I created for this channel was built in large part around exactly this work. The work of moving from a love that is performed to a love that is inhabited, from a self that earns to a self that simply is. It contains specific exercises for identifying the earliest roots of the earning pattern, where it came from, what it was protecting you from, and what it has cost you in the years since. And it contains a structured path for beginning to practice the alternative. The link is in the description, and I will come back to it. But right now, there is something even more important I need to show you. Aqui está a parte 2, continuação e conclusão. There is a question that sits at the heart of everything we have been discussing, and it is a question that most people spend years circling without ever asking directly. The question is this: what would you do differently in your relationship if you genuinely believed at the level of the body and the nervous system and not just the rational mind, that you were already enough. Not almost enough. Not enough if you tried harder or gave more or accommodated better. Already enough as you are right now, before you have done a single thing to earn it. For most people who are living inside the earning pattern, that question produces a kind of vertigo, because the honest answer, if they sit with it long enough to let it surface, is almost everything. I would stop apologizing before I have finished thinking. I would stop softening my opinions before I have finished expressing them. I would stop monitoring his face across the dinner table and start actually being present at the dinner table. I would stop offering more than I have and start offering what I actually have. I would stop performing the relationship and start living it. Diana arrived at that question on a Thursday morning, sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee she had made for herself. Not for Thomas, not in anticipation of what he might want, but for herself, because she wanted it. It was a small thing, embarrassingly small. But she noticed, in the making of it, that she had been so thoroughly oriented toward the management of other people's experience for so long that the simple act of doing something solely because she wanted it felt unfamiliar, slightly transgressive, like a muscle she had been careful not to use for years because using it felt like taking up too much space. And in that moment, in the small, quiet, slightly absurd moment of a woman sitting alone with a cup of coffee she had made for herself, something shifted, not dramatically, not with the weight of revelation, but with the particular quietness of something that has been true for a long time finally being acknowledged. She thought, I have been making myself smaller than I am for so long that I have forgotten what my actual size is. That thought, I have forgotten what my actual size is the beginning of everything. It is the beginning of the return to the self that existed before the earning pattern took hold. Before the accommodating and the apologizing and the careful management of everyone else's emotional temperature became the primary organizing principle of a life. Before love became something to be pursued rather than something to be inhabited. But I want to be precise about what this return looks like, because there is a version of this message that gets distorted in the telling, that gets simplified into something like, love yourself first and everything else will follow, in a way that is so vague as to be useless and so passive as to be almost insulting to the genuine difficulty of the work involved. The return to the self is not a feeling you arrive at and then possess. It is not a confidence that you generate through affirmations or a self-worth that you construct through achievements. It is a practice, a specific, daily, sometimes deeply uncomfortable practice of choosing yourself in the moments where the earning pattern most powerfully demands that you choose otherwise. Let me tell you what that practice looked like for Diana. And I want to be honest about the fact that it did not begin in a way that felt empowering or liberating or like the beginning of a new chapter. It began in a way that felt terrifying. The first time Diana chose herself, in a moment where she would previously have chosen to disappear, she was in the middle of a conversation with Thomas about something that had been bothering her for weeks. A pattern of his that had been landing on her as dismissiveness, as a kind of casual inattention to her that accumulated over time into something she could no longer comfortably explain away. In the past, she would have raised it carefully, softened it extensively, surrounded it with so many qualifications and reassurances that by the time she finished speaking, the original concern had been buried under layers of her own preemptive accommodation. She would have made it so easy for him to receive that she would have made it nearly impossible for him to actually hear. This time she said it plainly, not harshly, not with the accumulated resentment of years. She was careful about that, because she understood the difference between honesty and the weaponizing of honesty, but plainly, without the softening, without the qualifications, without the performance of making herself easy. She said, "When you do that, I feel invisible, and I need you to know that, because it matters to me, and because I matter." The last 3 words, "because I matter," were the hardest she had ever said in her marriage. Not because Thomas was a man who had told her she didn't matter, but because saying them out loud in that plain and unqualified way required her to believe them, and the believing of them, the actual present tense bodily belief that she mattered, not because she had earned it but simply because she did, was the thing she had been practicing toward without knowing it since that Thursday morning at the kitchen table. Thomas's response surprised her, not because it was perfect. It wasn't. He was defensive at first, in the way that most people are when they receive feedback that touches something they haven't examined. But beneath the defensiveness, she saw something she had not expected: attention, real attention. The quality of presence that had been absent from his responses to her for a long time. The quality that absence had taught her she was not entitled to expect. And she understood, with a clarity that felt almost physical, that the attention had always been available, that it had been withheld not through cruelty, but through a dynamic she had participated in creating. A dynamic in which her willingness to make herself easy had inadvertently communicated that she did not require his full presence, that she would manage, that she always managed. This is what no one tells you about stopping the begging, about stopping the pursuit and the earning and the exhausting performance of trying to deserve love. It changes the dynamic, not because you have become more strategic or more withholding or more challenging in some calculated way, but because the version of you that is no longer performing is a fundamentally more present, more real, more interesting version than the one that was. The version of you that says, "Because I matter," without flinching is, almost inevitably, more magnetic than the version that surrounds every need with so many qualifications that the need itself disappears. This is not manipulation. I want to be absolutely clear about that. This is not a strategy for making yourself more attractive by pretending to need less. This is the genuine consequence of a real internal shift, the consequence of a person who has stopped performing and started being. And the difference between those two things is felt by the people around you in ways they may not be able to articulate, but that they respond to nonetheless. Because human beings are extraordinarily sensitive to authenticity. We recognize it at a level below conscious processing, and the presence of a person who is genuinely, quietly, unperformatively at home in themselves, who does not need your validation to know their own worth, is one of the most compelling presences there is. But I want to stay honest about something, because this is a channel that does not deal in false comfort. The internal shift we are describing, the movement from earning to inhabiting, from performing to being, does not automatically fix a marriage that has been shaped by years of the old dynamic. Thomas did not become a different person because Diana became a different version of herself. The patterns between them, the grooves worn by years of a particular kind of relating, did not disappear because one of them had a realization at a kitchen table. What changed was the starting point, What changed was the ground from which Diana was now engaging, and that change in ground changed the nature of every exchange that followed, not instantly and not perfectly, but genuinely and cumulatively. There were conversations that were harder than they had been before, because Diana was no longer managing Thomas's comfort at the expense of her own truth. There were moments of friction that the old dynamic would have smoothed over before they could become anything, and that the new dynamic allowed to exist long enough to be actually addressed. There were evenings when Thomas, accustomed to a wife who adjusted herself to his emotional weather, found himself in the unfamiliar position of being asked to adjust to hers, and those evenings were uncomfortable for both of them. But here is what grew from that discomfort over time that could not have grown from the old smoothness: respect. A new and genuine respect. Thomas's for Diana and Diana's for herself, that the performing version of their marriage had never been able to generate. Because respect in an intimate relationship cannot be earned through accommodation. It cannot be earned through making yourself easy. It is generated by the willingness to be real, by the courage to take up your actual space, by the quiet, consistent, undefensive insistence on being treated as someone who matters, not because you have performed mattering, but because you simply do. And here is what I want you to understand about your own marriage or your own relationship, or the pattern you carry into every significant relationship you enter. The love you have been begging for, chasing, earning, exhausting yourself in the pursuit of, is not made more available by the chasing. It is made less available, because the chasing communicates at the level that human beings communicate most powerfully, which is the level beneath the words, that you do not believe you deserve it without the chase, and that communication, that quiet, persistent, unintentional broadcast of your own insufficiency, shapes how the people around you experience you in ways that no amount of strategic behavior can override. The moment you stop chasing is not the moment you stop wanting love. It is the moment you stop agreeing with the part of yourself that says the wanting is not enough, that you, as you are not enough. It is the moment you stand in your own life, in your own kitchen, in your own marriage, in your own skin, and decide, with full knowledge of the risk and without any guarantee of the outcome, that you are done making yourself smaller than you are in hopes that a smaller version of you will be easier to love. You will not be easier to love. You will be less, and less is not what you came here to be. Now, I want to talk about what this looks like in the practical daily texture of a marriage that is rebuilding itself on this new foundation, because the internal shift is essential. It is the beginning of everything, but it does not exist in a vacuum. It has to be lived. It has to be practiced in the actual moments of the relationship, in the conversations and the silences and the small daily choices that constitute a shared life. The first practical change that follows from the internal shift is what I call the end of preemptive shrinking. Preemptive shrinking is the habit of making yourself smaller before you have been asked to, of softening your opinion before anyone has challenged it, of apologizing before anyone has expressed hurt, of giving more than was requested in hopes that the generosity will prevent the withdrawal you are always at some level anticipating. It is the behavioral expression of the belief that your natural size is too much, that if you show up fully, you will be too loud, too needy, too demanding, too real for the relationship to hold. Ending preemptive shrinking does not mean becoming louder or more demanding, or less considerate of your partner's experience. It means simply stopping the automatic reduction of yourself that happens before anyone has asked for it. It means finishing your sentence before you qualify it. It means expressing your need before you have already decided it won't be met. It means taking up the space you actually occupy, rather than the reduced space you have decided is more acceptable. This will feel uncomfortable at first. It will feel, in the moments of practicing it, like taking a risk, like exposing yourself, like removing a layer of protection that you have been wearing for so long that you had almost forgotten it was there. And that discomfort is not a sign that you are doing it wrong. It is a sign that you are doing it right, that you are in the territory where the real change happens, which is always, in my experience, the territory that feels slightly more exposed than you are used to. The second practical change is what I call the practice of receiving. Because one of the least discussed consequences of the earning pattern is the difficulty it creates around receiving. People who are oriented toward earning love, who experience love as something to be pursued and deserved, often find that when love is freely offered, they struggle to take it in. They deflect the compliment. They minimize the gesture. They find a way to make themselves less rather than more in the face of being appreciated, because the appreciation doesn't quite land in a self that has not yet made room for it, because the deep unconscious belief that you are not quite enough cannot easily process evidence that you are. Practicing receiving means, concretely, pausing in the moments when love is offered and allowing it to land, not deflecting, not immediately reciprocating in a way that moves the attention off yourself, not minimizing, just receiving, letting the appreciation exist in the space between you and your partner, without rushing to redistribute it, letting the gesture matter, letting yourself be seen as someone who is worth the gesture, without immediately moving to earn the next one. It is, in practice, one of the simplest and most difficult things a person can do, and it changes the internal landscape of a relationship more quickly and more profoundly than almost any other single practice I have encountered. Applying all of this alone, without structure, without a clear framework for moving from the recognition of the pattern to the practice of something different, is genuinely difficult. The earning pattern is old, it is deeply rooted, and the moments when it most powerfully reasserts itself are precisely the moments when you are least resourced to interrupt it, when you are tired or afraid or in the middle of a conversation that is already emotionally charged. Having a structure for those moments, a specific, practiced, pre-decided set of responses to replace the automatic ones, is the difference between intention and actual change. This is what the ebook provides. Beyond what we have covered today, it contains a detailed guide to identifying the specific expressions of the earning pattern in your own behavior, the particular ways your history has shaped your particular version of the pursuit. It contains the receiving practice in structured form with specific exercises for building the capacity to let love land. And it contains what I call the sufficiency statement, a personally crafted, psychologically grounded declaration of your own worth that is designed to be used in the specific moments when the earning pattern is most loudly insisting that you are not enough. The link is in the description. I want you to consider it seriously because the work we are discussing today is real work, and real work goes further with real tools. As we come to the end of this video, I want to leave you with something that I hope you will carry with you. Diana did not become a different person by stopping the begging. She became more fully herself. She became the version of herself that had always been there beneath the performing, quieter, more present, more genuinely connected to her own experience, and therefore more genuinely capable of connecting to Thomas's. The marriage did not become perfect. It became real. And real, with all its friction and uncertainty and imperfection, was so much more sustaining than the performed version had ever been. The love you want is not on the other side of trying harder. It is not on the other side of giving more or accommodating better or making yourself easier. It is on the other side of the decision to stop agreeing with the part of you that says you need to earn it. It is waiting in the version of you that takes up your full space, speaks your full truth, and receives love without immediately deflecting it back. That version of you is not who you need to become. It is who you already are, beneath everything you have learned to perform in the name of being loved enough. The work, the real, unglamorous, profoundly worthwhile work, is simply the work of remembering that, of practicing that, of choosing one small moment at a time to be that, until it is no longer a choice but simply who you are. If this video has reflected something back to you that you have been carrying for a long time, I want you to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because this is a journey, not a single destination. And every video in this series takes you somewhere further along the path toward the kind of love that does not require you to disappear in order to receive it. The ebook is in the description. Your story does not have to be one of endless pursuit. It can be one of genuine arrival into yourself, and from that ground, into the love that was always capable of meeting you there. You were never meant to beg for it. You were always meant to simply be worth it, and you already are.